Well, hello, and welcome to thoughtraid. You might notice that Brandon looks a little different today.
Wow.
We're talking about race and Christianity.
Wow.
Let's go.
And the thing is, we kind of match too. It's a
Well, welcome to thoughtraid, where we take thoughts and find better ways of thinking about them. I don't normally introduce us because I'm Tim and I'm secondary to
You're
Brandon.
looking at me, and I'm like, yeah, this is when we do the thought stuff, and it's thoughts are involved.
Something about thoughts.
Yeah, I don't.
But joining me today is my friend Jordyn Jones. Or
Yeah, no, that's
yeah,
my name. Yeah.
I was meeting with somebody else today named last name Jones. I was like, wait, did I get him mixed up? Oh no.
No, that's it. Yeah.
So you might also hear Brandon in the background. We just didn't have room for his whiteness today because we're talking about race. Starting off spicy.
You miss all the shots you don't take.
That's true. But Jordyn reached out to us because we extended an offer to have him speak with us. And he's got something on his heart, specifically Christianity and as Christians, how we navigate racism. So I guess I kind of just want to start off and Jordyn, allow you to talk about your heart and what God was telling you and why this is heavy. Like, what is it exactly that you want to focus on?
Okay. Well, no, in truth, there were some things that I wanted to get off right off the bat. One, as believers, our ultimate goal is to be Christ-like. How can we be more Christ-like?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that involves seeing past, seeing to the heart of what's really happening right in the world. Right,
Mm-hmm.
That's vastly important. But also seeing past things that impede your ability to love somebody. Anything that impedes your ability to love somebody speaks to your heart and the heart of Christ. There is nothing impeding your ability, his ability to love people. He died for us before any of us accepted Christ.
Mm-hmm.
He died for us. So that is the giant jump, I think, sometimes between us living a life that is Christ-like and then us living for ourselves. It's getting our heart right.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't believe in calling people out. I really do believe in calling people up. And so I think it's important to talk about how can we be better? How can we love each other better? It's the name of the game. So I was sort of, the Lord has a tendency to talk to me about things, to prime me. And so the Lord had primed me to have a conversation about how believers deal with race. So when the platform was afforded to me, it was the confirmation that I needed to be like, oh, okay, well, this, I guess, is the platform to talk about it. So
Yeah.
I figured why not come into it with that energy.
That's cool. And I guess to provide a little bit of context, Jordyn just wrapped up a session out in California, which is, as far as the Christian climate, slightly different than the East Coast. And I don't want to say who the friend is specifically, but you were telling me that you had a friend and you were trying to have a conversation about race relations or something about race. And there was a block. Yeah. There was a difference of opinion. There was a difference of understanding. There was something there. And it just seemed like you guys couldn't communicate, even though and I'm going to say this without affording the idea that if you're not Christian, you're not on the same side of the fence, but you guys were on the same side of the Jesus fence, like the understanding of Jesus. And that's what kind of put more salt in the wound of being misunderstood. Correct?
Yeah. It's this energy that I think, and I believe it is a spirit. So we're going to get into that later. I will explain to you.
Hold on to your kilts, Baptists.
But on wax, it's one of those things where I'm looking at a friend. I'm looking at a brother in Christ. I'm looking at somebody who I will share eternity with, right?
Yeah.
And I go, why is this conversation so difficult? When all I'm saying is like, things are happening that are upsetting to me.
So what was the conversation exactly?
The conversation, they called me, and actually it was right around the time of George Floyd's death and those like riots or whatever, and I also happen to have COVID, so that didn't help.
Okay, so this was like early last year.
Yeah, early last year, or like last summer, I guess.
Mhm.
And he had called me, and I got this call, and I was getting several calls from several folks. I had several friends call me to try and parse through what was happening, but one friend in particular called me, and they really could not handle me just being like, yeah, I know people are upset, and they're upset for valid reasons. Like, they're
Mhm.
upset because they're seeing reality, and reality doesn't look the way that they want it to look. But more than that, they're people are in pain, right? People's hearts are in pain. People's lives feel like they're in danger. People's well-being and safety is in jeopardy.
Mhm.
And it turned into a debate, and frankly, I just don't feel like that's a debatable topic. That's how people feel. That's how
Yeah.
the other rest of the several people who were calling me also felt.
Mhm.
And some other folks who had called me were noticing people feel that way and were asking why people felt that way. He just really would not dialogue with me in terms of like, no, but I'm telling you the truth. Like, this is how people feel, and this is really what's happening, and it's really affecting them. And so I don't harbor any unforgiveness towards the gentleman, but it did hurt me at the time, because I was like, I don't know why. We know we live in the world that we live in. Like, everybody
Mhm.
does. It's not if you're a believer, we say the phrase, we live in a fallen world. If you're not a believer, you say, yeah, life sucks. Like, right? No, like a core tenet of Buddhism is to understand, right, life is suffering. Like, people around the globe from all different backgrounds understand that, like, there is oppression that exists in reality.
Mhm.
I think sometimes believers are the people who seem to want to act like it's non-existent, more
Well,
than others. And
there's a pill in the Christian
don't
faith
understand.
where scripturally it says that there will be tribulation. That's one of the promises that Christians don't
Yeah,
want to hold true
it's
to.
real, yeah, and it's real. And what does the Bible say? I wish I had the verse, but it says, "Don't toil in vain." Right? If your work is like towards the Lord, I'm definitely butchering that.
Mhm.
Don't quote that. Look it up. You'll find it. But your toil is not in vain, right? That's fine, but toil is implicit. Like, toil is implicit. We're supposed to be Christ-like. What was Christ's life? Like, he
Mhm.
had fun. Don't get me wrong. He turned water to wine and partied with a bunch of people
He was
before it
like,
was his time. He told his mom, "It's not my time yet," and still did it. Right? So he had revels, right? But that man died on a cross for us, but endured the worst of the worst.
Mhm.
Um, endured the worst of the worst because he loved people that much. I think that's the jump. Like, we as believers, we get outraged when there is toil, and we don't love people.
Ooh,
But
so
why?
let me touch on that real quick because that speaks a lot to my shortcomings in marriage. Um, it says you just said that especially as believers we don't like some of the toil, and I don't know if you're a man in marriage, a man in a relationship, or just somebody in a relationship who is a fixer. When there's a problem, I want to fix it, especially if I already know the answer and I just want to move on. I don't want to sit in the feeling. I don't want to sit in the
Yeah.
empathy because it's like, this sucks. Why do we want to sit here? Why do we want to engage in this? I just want to fix it and move on. Here's the answer. Just receive it and let's go. And then I get really frustrated
Yeah.
when we don't just let's go. And that's what you're talking about
Yeah.
because the answer is clear. It's like, okay, well, racism is a thing. Our skin color, you're darker than I am. And, we've had our different types of oppression because I'm Asian, you're
Mhm.
black. And it's like, okay, well, the oppression sucks. Going through that sucks. And because it sucks, I don't want to feel that. The answer is just moving on, pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps and just holding ourselves
Yeah.
accountable to our thoughts. But still, there are people that are hurting. So
Right.
how do you go through that? And I think that's what you're trying to communicate. If I'm hearing you properly, that was your issue with your friend, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't as much an issue with my friend as it was with, like, the ideology.
Mm-hmm.
I understand my friend is a fine gentleman. Like, we wouldn't be friends otherwise.
Mhm.
I listen. I'll be very clear about this. 'Cause I'm not ashamed of this. I don't have very many friends, and I don't think we're necessarily called to have a ton of friends. Jesus had 12. People in the Bible had less, man. Isaiah has like 3, right? Like, no, for real. I love everybody with the love Christ has for them, and I like a lot of folks. I'm not very close with many folks. So the fact that he and I were close, I know that he's a good gentleman. We wouldn't be close otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, some of that makes it hurt worse. And then you go, it's not an issue I have with you. It's this issue with this ideology because we let it run rampant. We let it run rampant. And I say we as the church, but even if you're not a believer, like we as a people group, we act so outraged when it comes to the forefront or what have you. But in truth, we let it run rampant.
That sounds like what David was saying last night about how everybody's vying for justice. Injustice!
Right.
Injustice! And yet we go about injustices every day, just in different ways.
Right. And we tolerate it. I think the want is for... Here was my issue, my big issue, I guess, with it. This is a better way of putting it. My issue was that the want is for me to just get over it. But in getting over it, you're asking me to become complicit with that oppression.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot do that. That is both morally wrong, but even to a greater degree. Spiritually, that's not okay. I should not just be like, this is an okay thing to be happening. I should be outraged by it. Jesus turned over tables, man. Like, it's not like we're supposed to let everything go. We're not supposed to harbor unforgiveness, but we're not supposed to just let things happen and be okay with everything. And me not being okay with injustice, that I think is directly linked to this spirit of oppression, that is fine. It's fine for me to be outraged by that. How do I go about that as a believer? How do I seek the Lord about that? How do I try to affect change His way? Definitely the way to go. I don't think you should be burning down storefronts. Yeah, I'd agree with that. But on the flip side, I'd also agree with, if you want me to just be like, yeah, well, it's a shame what's happening, and that to be it, you've misunderstood the call that the Lord has given us, I think. Because we're right. What does Ephesians say, right? For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against authorities, against powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in heavenly realms. And we're given an armor of God in the Bible. We are fighting a war. We are fighting a war against all the aforementioned things, dark forces, right? I know it sounds mythological at a level, and it kind of is. I dig that. I think it's cool. But we're fighting a war, and the Lord has already won the victory. Jesus has already won the victory. That's fine. But our job is to mitigate casualty.
Well, can I ask you a question? Because I know there's a lot of people that are listening to this, and you know, in my close friend group, we were trying to navigate this too, because in our friend group, we have people all across the racial spectrum.
Yeah.
And some people have experienced depression, some people have not. Some people have experienced lots of it, some people little, you know? Yeah. And trying to have compassion for something that you haven't experienced is kind of hard.
It is.
So from your perspective, looking at this topic as somebody who's gone through it, how much, so I wrote down how much as the person feeling, so as you or as me or whoever's going through something, or like, and if you can't relate to this, anywhere where you feel like people aren't having empathy for you as a Christian, just all the hardships you go through, how much expectation and what type of expectation can we put on people as far as them having empathy? Like, what do you expect of them? And also, what do you expect of Jesus? Like, how is that different?
People aren't perfect, so I can't expect somebody to be perfect. I expect Jesus is, maybe this is like, I would put it this way. Jesus is the great comforter. Like, the Lord knows your heart. So if I go to the Lord for comfort, and I am diligent about seeking Him for comfort, some people want to be mad. You want to be mad, I can't help you. I can't help you. I can't give you any advice. I'm sorry. Like, you're gonna be stuck that way, and I hope you have fun. But the Lord will comfort you, and also can give you action steps to do to help change the situation or to be a part of something better. So that's the Jesus end of it. But as a believer, I'll go to and I actually just bookmarked this. I'm really glad I did. Man, Bibles, man, they really come in handy. They're so useful. What is it? Yeah, okay. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. That's it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in. People are in mourning, right? People are in mourning, and they're mourning both tangibly, right? There are real people who are experiencing loss, sure, but in any regard to any race issue, you're mourning what you believed was your safety.
Mm-hmm.
Was you felt safe and now you don't, right? A bunch of Asian hate happening right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
People feel like they are physically not safe. That would, if somebody's weeping about that, and your first instinct is to be like, stop that, man. Like, that's just how it goes.
Just spray with a bottle.
Right, where's your heart?
Stop.
That's biblically not right. So, what I expect from my believer friends, and this isn't an expectation that is punitive, but it's what I expect from them because, again, you call people up. I would expect you to treat me in a Christ-like manner because I believe that you can follow Christ in the same way that I believe that I can follow Christ. Will you make mistakes? Yes. Will I make mistakes? Yes. But I expect you to weep with me because you can have compassion for somebody and you have experienced none of what they went through because you understand what the Lord is asking you to do. You love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So first, love yourself. Very important. But how would you feel if it was happening to you? It's not about how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Love your neighbor as yourself. It has to do with how you feel about yourself and how you feel about that other person. It doesn't have to do with how you feel about what that other person feels. How would you feel if you were in my position? You probably wouldn't like it. And, laugh with me if it's time to revel. But if it's time to weep and you're not weeping with me, then I'm gonna ask where your heart's at.
So we went to a young adults thing last night at our church called Roots, and David Ollinger was speaking, and he said something really interesting. And it's one of those fundamental things of Christianity that I think a lot of people don't really stick to or understand. And a lot of people just jump on the Christian bandwagon because they want the status on Facebook or they want all the good stuff, but not all the bad stuff. And that's a judgmental statement. So I'm sorry if whatever. But he said that when you decide to follow Jesus, you give up the right to see things as they are.
Right.
And you choose you make the choice to see things as God intended. And the reason I bring that up is when we got married, we had premarital counselors, and the woman, Beth Johnson, really awesome woman, told my wife, and we were just talking about all things marriage. And they were talking about being unfaithful, like just perspective on that. And she said, I would like to think that as a Christian, if my husband ever cheated on me, that my heart position would be mourning for him because he loves me. I know he loves me or he wouldn't marry me. And something is broken in him to the point that's allowing him to choose that.
Wow.
I'm like, whoa,
dude,
that like, I don't know if I could do that, but at the same time, that's what we're called to do.
Gosh, I'd move up the wedding date. That's such a that is the most godly response I've ever heard.
Yeah, but on both sides of the spectrum, it's like if you are my, you are one of my black friends. You sure. and you have gone through what you've gone through, and you're feeling a certain
word.
What?
Acquaintance, maybe?
Are we not friends?
Maybe like, I don't know, like we shake hands.
Well, Brandon.
I got him on live. You just see his real reaction. I just want everybody.
I just want to shed a tear. You're just
I'm just kidding.
Plunging a knife into my insecurities.
No, Tim, I love you, Tim. We are friends.
And I made you tea.
Tim, I love you. We are real friends.
I just came in here. Ding, 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 ding.
I couldn't resist the ability to get you on the internet.
Okay, moving on.
I couldn't handle not being able to do that.
You being a black friend of mine, having gone through what you've gone through, just thinking about what Beth Johnson modeled, right? Yeah. Like you're going through this, and it's like, the stuff you're talking about makes me feel horrible. And I could have the position of, that was years ago. You didn't even experience slavery yourself. Get over it. Let's move forward because God doesn't want us to focus on that. That's one position. But also the other godly position, much like Beth modeled, was, man, I'm sorry that you're angry right now, and I know you're hurting,
Right.
and I'm not going to explain that away because there's something inside of you that needs healing.
Yeah. And that's how we should be. What does the Bible say about holiness, man? It's right. Hebrews 12:14. Make every effort to live in peace with all men and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. Like, factually, the Bible tells you God is invisible if you don't model holiness. If nobody in the church was modeling holiness, nobody would know the Lord. That's it. Like, and I say that to say, because I know so many young black folks specifically falling, literally either who won't hear any of the gospel, but who are falling away. I cry and pray for friends because I've had this conversation over and over where they go, whatever God is being preached by said folks does not believe in me. That God is not a God that is for me, which is factually wrong. Which is factually wrong. I don't even think we understand the scope of what Jesus had to go through to die for us. But being a God and sitting outside of time, outside of pain, outside of hurt, outside of poverty or anything, to make yourself a man is already a leap that we can never fathom. You can't turn yourself into an ant, and even then, an ant has some level of intelligence. Our intelligence compared to God's is an infinitesimal jump.
Your analogy kind of reminds me of what is that show where the boss, like the CEO, undercover boss?
Yeah. Like, it's not even that, man, because he's going there and looking at the workers. That'd be like you looking at the like dude who's doing the plumbing in the sewer. You were like the boss, and now you're just doing the plumbing for your store. Greater than that, he takes that jump and then dies a tragic death, as people call him a liar, which the Lord defines himself. The Lord actually defines himself by saying, I'm not a man that I would lie. He separates how he is, his person, from humans by saying, I'm not a liar. And he gets called a liar. They like that. So to be God and to have to experience that for us is crazy. Huge leap, right? And so the Lord does love everybody, righteous, unrighteous. He wants everybody to turn towards the faith, but people don't see that because they're not seeing holiness.
Can we back up for just a second? Because
sure.
what you're saying is making me think, and I'm just like curious because you were talking about the black community and about how there's so many black young adults
I can't
that are
speak for everybody, but I've had
right.
this conversation enough times.
Just from your own experience. What is their main frustration? Like what is the impetus for them saying that? What specifically?
So out of the conversations that I've had, folks look at me and they go, somebody once said, dude, is that not just and I know this sounds weird, but I'll explain it. They were like, is that not just the white man's religion, insofar as people who oppressed us historically have believed this and use this to back oppression over and over and over again, or use this to back, right, their feeling superior, right? That feeling superior, I think, is the jump between, right, let alone holiness. If you're not going to look at me and view me as I'm a person who deserves the same things you deserve, then I'm going to be like, those people are fundamentally, right, like dehumanizing me. And then what you believe begins to look like what also dehumanizes them. So because you feel superior and your Christianity aids in that, and your whiteness, I guess, aids in that, now it feels to me like your faith, what you believe in, is dehumanizing me, right? Because it's what you use as the grounding to base how much you feel superior. And so I think it's been that. And I've had this conversation too many times for me to be even slightly comfortable. But it's like, okay, so now I'm looking at folks and being like, yeah, plenty of people do use the Lord to be superior, and those same people have historically oppressed using that same thing to be superior. But I promise you it's real, and Jesus does love you. I can model holiness. I really can. Sometimes I fail, and I fail a lot. I'm a human. But at the same time, man, the amount of unholiness that is modeled, it's hard for me to be that one black friend who's like, no, I believe it and it's enriching my life. And for them not to look at me like a sellout and look at every other thing they see as the truth, right? The church is supposed to be the model for the truth. And the church, I believe this fully. Maybe this is wrong. The church will always be the model for the truth. Sometimes we're not modeling it correctly, but the church will always be the model for the truth. Okay. That is our call.
So I just want to clear something up, because this is something that tickles my frustration with religion specifically, not Jesus, religion. Bingo. And the word church.
Bingo.
I have I used to work for GameStop in the mall. We were talking about that before the stream.
This guy sold me so many videos.
Yeah, I knew you before it was cool to know you.
I'm telling you.
But back then, the mall culture, where there were a lot of people there that were either atheist, agnostic, or of the LGBT community who's been hurt by the church, you know? Yeah. And so the word church is almost like a sinful word to use in those environments, because when you say the church needs to be loving, just think about the image that gets conjured in your mind. It's a building with white people inside that go, and I'm not saying everybody thinks that way. That's just like what I think of, just because I grew up in a very like, I grew up in the country, and that's all there was.
Yeah. I mean, okay, look at the Bible study we were just at last night, and I counted, knowing that I was going to be on this stream. There was just visually, phenotypically, I'm saying, of color, right? Because, Tim here is on the lighter side of the spectrum, right? There's a spectrum, and I don't know everybody's background there.
Yeah.
But phenotypically, like visually, it's just me. If you walk in there, right, we are taught, to walk by faith and not by sight. The world's not. The world sees, what is the world? Somebody walks in there, they look around, they see nobody. You're going to see nobody who looks like you. And situations typically where there's like a door and behind it are all white people, not a good space to be in. I don't like being in those spaces, right? It happens to be a church that, and I know what they're saying and what they're believing. But I'm saying, even just me in terms of my base comfort level, I would love for there to be more diversity. And it's the one that we go to when what they're saying is what's up.
Yeah.
Right? You can speak the truth, and speaking the truth is what you need to do. But, man, visually you can see it. Yeah, even where we go now. So, you're spot on.
Well, like just finishing that up, because I don't want it to be misconstrued. What I was saying was like the whole concept of the church. Like I have a mental picture of what it is, but when I guess if you get in charismatic circles, like church actually means just a gathering of people who follow Jesus. That's all it is. And so when you say the church should be the ones loving, what we actually mean by that, just for clarity, is not just what image is conjured in your mind, like this box of white people over here doing something, because we're talking about race relations. What we're talking about is groups of people, whether you're white, black, Asian, doesn't matter. Just any groups of people that are gathered in Jesus, loving people beyond the boundaries of whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's just for clarification.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Also, wait, like, I don't want to be this guy. I read a lot of theory, man. I really, truly do. Only because we live our lives as believers. You live your life based on the word and what the Lord has spoken to you. There's no but. And something that is not in the word can be very true as long as it lines up with the word. There are two theorists I wanted to point to illustrate a point that is very much on my heart that I just need to say. Stuart Hall suggests, right, he goes back to like a base level of our understanding of race, right? I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of like, I'll just be real, with a lot of white believers who go like, well, it's just your skin color, it doesn't matter. Yes, you're right. You're correct, I guess, at a level. But what Stuart Hall's research suggests, which is something we all know, if you're being honest with yourself, is that when we talk about race, as much as we're talking about phenotypical difference, that's what makes it easy to talk about race.
And for the 5th grade level readers, what is phenotypical? Color.
Just
and for me,
color of skin, just the look, right?
Okay.
We're talking about visual difference, which is why race is the factor by which we categorize people. It is the easiest one to do it with. It is the most prevalent feature that is the most different across lines, right? So race makes it easy. But when race is talked about, it's talked about as a summation of the culture of a perceived group of people, right? and you know it. If I say, if I say that's white people music, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If I say that's black people music, you know what I mean. If I were to go, yeah, you know, that's like an Asian cartoon. You know, you stop lying. You crazy right now because you acting like you don't know, but you know.
Now, if you're one of those people that are thinking these things, I don't want you to feel bad.
It's not bad.
Well, I'm reading a book called Story Branding right now, and it's talking about how if you get hit with a bunch of noise, your brain has to burn more calories to sort it out. And so we just default to the path of least resistance. So when you follow a story narrative or a theme, something that makes sense if you put it in this box, your brain doesn't have to work hard. And it's one of those things that you do in the subconscious. And so what we're talking about here, which was the big thing last year, was the Black Lives Matter story narrative, right? People called it a narrative, and it's a narrative for a reason, because just case in point, when I worked at GameStop, there would often be groups of black young adults or like youths come in the store. I would just watch them more closely because the narrative that had been painted was these are trouble sometimes.
Right.
You know, and I don't do that consciously. It's just, it was drilled into me, you know?
We all live with unconscious bias. Yeah.
And this narrative is the hurt that we're talking about. It's like, well, we need to heal that in all of us.
Right. And so that's what I wanted to say. When we talk about race, also, in addition to when we talk about church, we're really talking about this. When we talk about race, we're really talking about how we are creating a hierarchy between groups of people. That's it.
That's a really good way to put that.
Yeah. How we create hierarchy between people. That's what race is in a nutshell. It's we dumb it down to skin color because it's easy, but in truth, that would be a lie to say. Why did the 1/10 rule exist? Like, you know what I mean? Or one drop rule, sorry. Why did the one drop rule exist, right? Race is more than physical difference. So if you go, oh, it's just physical difference, whatever. Let's be honest, that's not true fully, right? That's the one. The two, which is the important part, I'm very serious about us being at war with dark forces. That is we're on this earth and that's what we're doing. If you're a believer and you don't believe that, I ask you to challenge your faith, because I think seeing it that way may help you deal with some things that start to come against you.
And if you don't want to think about that, just go watch Constantine.
Yeah, go watch
Constantine. Have you seen that?
The Keanu Constantine.
Oh, it's so
crazy. Good. It's actually a classic bop.
If you're kind of sensitive and you're like a super Christian, be careful, because it does have a lot of like gore and stuff in it.
Yeah, it's like dark, but boy, I'm telling you, spiritual warfare is warfare.
Yeah, you could also read a great book by Frank E. Peretti called This Present Darkness.
This Present Darkness, yeah. Haven't read much of it, man. That's
oh my gosh, heavy. I read it before I was a Christian.
But oh, dude,
and when you read stuff like that, you don't know who God is. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, dude, it goes crazy. It'll really get you, and maybe it should. But I say that to say, right? A theorist named Anibal Quintana, he writes this major essay called, I believe it's Coloniality, Modernity / Rationality. And what he's doing is defining two concepts. Modernity and rationality are interchangeable, so I'll just say modernity, and coloniality.
And for our viewers, would you explain what those are real quick?
And that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Okay, sorry.
So, no, I'm right there with you. So what he's saying with modernity, right, is this idea that the modern world we live in is built on a Eurocentric view. People who colonized other people were typically white folks. White folks are from certain cultural backgrounds, right? That's not to be like, if you're white, this is not like an anti-white thing. It's just real. Those people in those parts of the world had more resources to create more weapons. It really doesn't have to do with like they were superior in any fashion other than potentially weapons making, and which allowed them to conquer other people groups. When they conquered other people groups, their prevailing thought became the prevailing thought that was seen as superior, right? Because they were the impositional force. They were the forces that imposed themselves onto other people, right? Once you hit the Enlightenment era, right, in the U.S., where science sort of becomes what we view as the most valuable thing, right, and this idea of rationality, leaning on our own understanding, right, all that starts to take root and become the prevailing thought in the U.S., that then becomes what's superior, because the groups that conquered the other groups, that's what they believe. Right? That's what he's suggesting with modernity. What he suggests with coloniality is this idea. It's really simple. Really simple. You're going to love this or you're going to hate it. But the coloniality of power is what he suggests, which is just proximity to whiteness grants superiority culturally. Like what we view as superior cultures are white cultures. For instance, if I came on the show and I was like, hey, what's up, cuz? How you doing? Right? And I talk like that, you would implicitly think that my intellect was inferior.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's where implicit bias is sort of built from. This idea that proximity to whiteness or proximity to a certain kind of being, culture, kind of acting, that sort of thing, is superior.
Mm-hmm.
What Quinjano suggests, which is a pillar of decolonial thought, right? This idea where people are starting to now try to value other culture groups, is that those two things are implicitly linked, right? Modernity is ushered in by people who conquer. Those people have these ideas that our science prevails and a spiritual understanding of the world is stupid, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is also linked to the same groups of people in the same school of thought that suggest that people of other backgrounds and who look different and act different are inferior, right? And I to dumb it down, let me put it simply, right? The spirit that suggests that rationality and leaning on our own understanding is superior to a spiritual understanding of the world is the exact same spirit that suggests one person is superior to another.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, right? Why? Good example. Have you ever thought about this? Why does the KKK burn crosses? Like spiritually, from a spiritual, as a believer, have you ever thought about the link between these people think they're superior to other people, and they're the same people who are burning the image of the religion they claim to believe, right? Like, it's this spirit that we let go unchecked because we don't want to have this hard conversation of, listen, man, the same oppression that the church faces in terms of people being like, well, what you believe is stupid, a spiritual understanding of the world doesn't have any value. Same thing that says somebody else doesn't have any value or has less value. Same thing. And we're wrestling not with flesh and blood. We have to start to wrestle with this spirit in our lives. Everybody deals with implicit bias. Are you doing that because it's what you've been taught, or are you doing that because you're letting things play out that you should hold in check? That's what dropped in my spirit hard. Mm-hmm. Because even I have implicit bias. I still do. But why do I started to talk about people differently, right? I started to talk about people groups differently. I don't, even as a black dude these days, I don't like to say large-scale disparaging things about white people. Sometimes I do just go, white people. I think white people do that too, man. Come on. Sometimes you guys be doing some... I don't even want to get into it. Sometimes. What is Miracle Whip, yo? Why did you guys do this? What? Mayonnaise is already a jump. You didn't have to go crazy. You didn't have to do it. It's mayonnaise peanut butter. Why? But I don't even want to. Whatever.
It's peanut butter.
Like, why are you doing this? But but all jokes aside, on a real level, all jokes aside, I had to start changing the way that I talked about people, even in a joking context and even in like a white people context, because that spirit will take root in your heart and it will start to affect you and how you love people.
There was this, and it was on Facebook, so take this with a grain of salt. The comment made was still valid, and it was it had a picture of, I forget what her name was, but it was a black doctor, or she had a doctorate in something, and she was saying how allowing, and she was talking about black culture, allowing our youth allowing yourselves to call yourselves dog or thought or whatever, like all these weird, it's a disparaging term, but it's also a term where it's like, yeah, I'm a thug, that whole concept. Sure. It's like it's cyclical, and we have to work to get that out of our language. Thank you, Brandon. Yeah. Get it out of our language system. And I think Christians also really need to do that, because there's a lot of we joke about Christianese so much on this channel, and it's like, where did that even come from? Did that come from Jesus or culture?
Right. Yeah.
But talking about this topic, the title of today's stream, Brandon, titled "Are Christians Loving Others Who Don't Look Like Them?" well. And I think you've laid a really good foundation for the understanding of why scientifically and just what you've gone through and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think the answer is?
Can I just say Jesus? Can I talk about that? No, man. I'll hit you with another one, man. And this one I keep a lot of scriptures posted in my office, in my study. I have them around for pertinent things. So like, don't toil in vain is above all of the gear that I have to take to go to work. Next to my door, I keep this one. It says, "Be wise in the way you act towards outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversations always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." Or this one, right? I keep this one close to the heart, right? Religion that our Father accepts as pure and faith and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. People are hurting. This is fact. Even if you want to dispute whether they should be or not, it's fact. Our job is to take care of the widows and the orphans. So what I think the answer is to start learning to be wise to outsiders. I think to start to say your outsider there isn't specified. It doesn't say people outside the church. Who is an outsider? Like, who is an outsider? That person you don't talk to, whether that be because they come from a different neighborhood or they look different or they sound different, that person you should still be making an effort to talk to. I think as believers, if you start to say, who's a person that isn't in the same type of people I'm constantly around who I can minister to, that will change things. It just will.
I think we have to be careful there too, because just saying this person that's not a part of my group, they need me to minister to them, or who can I minister? Yeah. A lot of times when I've done that, I've gone in with the assumption that I'm going to minister to this person. And by minister to, it's like give them something that the Lord wants them to have. And I come out of it like, wow, I needed that.
Yeah. Yes. I don't mean it in a belittling fashion. I just mean it in a, are your eyes open to seeing the opportunity to invite somebody into, I mean, dude, anything that's godly, anything that's part of your life. If you're living a godly life, just asking somebody if they want to tag along to something may be important, or giving somebody encouragement may be important. I think we don't do enough to check bias. Like, we just let it run rampant. And we also act like we're able to get away scot-free with sticking to our circle and sticking to the people that we're around and the people who are like us.
Or slapping a scripture on it and saying, well, I've done my Christian duty.
Yeah, I've done my part.
I've done my Christian duty. Time to move on.
And that's not it. Okay, I'll give you another example. Or I guess I'll make it more pertinent to what I wanted to talk about as well. Right, I wanted to talk about this in the vein of how do we love people better, right? So I'll hit you with, what am I looking at? Here we go. Classics only. Love. sorry, my bad. If I speak in tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I have nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but I have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and is kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. I think we have to start being cognizant of what that means. Another translation says, for instance, one of those is love always trusts. You're not supposed to put your trust in man. It's not saying like trust everybody and just believe that people are always going to be what you need over the Lord. But everybody, there's some group of people you don't trust. I guarantee you. There's some group of people you don't trust. And you probably have a racial label on that. I have a hard time trusting white people. I don't lie about this. I have a hard time trusting white people. That doesn't mean that I don't try to do that, though. And so I think from oppressed groups, it has to start to be a place of that's still my neighbor and that's still my brother, and I want them to be better. I don't want somebody to live thinking that they're superior to somebody else. That's its own oppression. And so to start to think that way, but I think from groups that have historically oppressed other groups, I think you also have to start to say, would I not trust this person? Am I just going to implicitly believe X, Y, and Z about this person over what the Lord would say about them? The Lord would tell you to be patient with them, would tell you to be kind, would tell you to treat them as an outsider well. And so every single day, I think there's at least one opportunity for you to challenge yourself and say, okay, the world has taught me to treat this person this way. Can I treat them the way that the Lord has called them to? That is my answer. Every single day, try to find the one opportunity to say, the world has taught me to treat this person this way. How has the Lord taught me to treat them? And to change the way you act. If we do that, I mean, that will change things.
Yeah. I just want to bring up and call out somebody that we go to church with, Seth Wingate. He was telling me one time when I lived with him, he used to go downtown Winston, and he found these two black youths, and they were young, like 12 years old, riding their bike around. And I forget how the conversation started, but as he was engaging with them, he could have made any sort of assumptions, because if you, especially downtown Winston, if you see people riding around on their bikes, I mean, you already start making assumptions. Downtown Winston, right, over near MLK or whatever. Yeah. But he took the time to talk to them, and I think they went somewhere, like walked into a store or something, and he was explaining income tax to them because they didn't know why you had to pay tax on something at 12 years old. Yeah. And you learn that in grade school normally. And I just think it's so cool that he took the time to ask them questions and to teach them something without making an assumption that, like, oh, why don't they know this yet? Just troubled youths, because a lot of people do stuff like that. Yeah. And that's just a really good example to follow, because you don't know why somebody's doing something. I saw a quote by, and it probably wasn't a quote by him. Who's the guy that played in Flubber, killed himself? Robin Williams. He said, the quote said, I think somebody else said it, but the quote was, be kind to people that you know. You have no idea what kind of battle they're fighting. You don't know where people have been from. You don't know what they're going through, how they're feeling, what they're thinking, the circumstances they're going home to. True. Our job is to love them where they're at. Right. And like you said, what did you say? Not call them out, call them up.
Call them up.
That's such a great one-liner. Don't call people out, call them up. Yeah. And that's all, like setting the example and then saying, hey, you can do this too. Right. Like, let's go.
Show them holiness. How will they know the Lord if they do not see holiness? It's just real. Yeah.
That's so good. Do you have any other nuggets that you think are pertinent that you want to bring up?
On a personal level, I think I've said all the Lord asked me to say. So on a personal level, man, I used to think hard that people did what they wanted. People don't do what they want. People do what they know. People do what they know. And I think we hold people. Paul talks about the fact that he doesn't even judge himself in the Bible. He goes, I don't judge folks and I don't judge myself. It's not for us to do. Your job is not ever to sit there and go, to hold the world will be held to the law when their day of judgment comes. We're held to grace once you accept the Lord. Our want should be for everybody to be held to the standard of grace so that we can all rejoice in heaven together. You shouldn't want somebody to be damned. You shouldn't. And your heart should really weep for the lost. That is a hard position to be in. And then on top of that, if you're experiencing oppression in your time, that's extraordinary grief to put somebody under. The mind of children in the inner city, it's been done, right? Children in violent inner cities, it's the same thing that happens to children in war zones. Your brain develops at different rates. Like, it has a physical effect on folks. That's terrifying. And that should really bother all of us. And so before you start to judge people as if they're just doing whatever they want, perhaps look at that person and say, man, will people do what they know? I don't think it's our job to hate ignorance without educating it. You can despise ignorance as long as you're educating folks on a better way. You can't despise ignorance and then not tell anybody the better way. And so, don't hide your light, I guess, would be the name of that game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be who the Lord has called you to be to everyone. There is no cap on that. And the minute you start to feel superior morally or whatever to somebody, you're in the wrong. You're wrong. That is not what you should be doing, ever. Ever. Your job is not to judge anyone. So I guess that would be my last point. Oh, also, one other thing I did want to mention before we go, seriously. If you're somebody who's like vastly patriotic, I'm not trying to like kill your vibe. Understand that the United States is not. We have this idea, I think, of like American exceptionalism and like jingoism. We feel like we are just the protagonist in the world's story or narrative or whatever. Understand this: every kingdom on earth is an earthly kingdom. They are all corrupt. They are all doing things they shouldn't be doing. Daniel, right, interprets a vision by Nebuchadnezzar. That's this giant statue made of all these different metals from head to toe. It gets worse, right? The metals get worse and worse. And this rock takes out the statue, and then the rock turns into a mountain that fulfills the whole earth, right? Daniel explains it to him. He says, your kingdom is vast and is going to be the greatest kingdom that's ever been. And every kingdom after that is going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until the Lord comes back and instates his kingdom. The United States is not heaven. Somebody saying that the way that income tax funds schools creates a cycle of poverty, you shouldn't take deep offense to that. If you're a believer, you should say, is that real? You should look into it. But your job is not to protect the U.S.'s good name or to fight the fight politically for anybody. Your job is to say, as a believer, well, I know nations are corrupt. That tracks, right? Your job is not to say, I personally don't believe that privatized prisons should exist. I think it's horribly wrong that people are able to make money off of slaves. I just think it's a problem because they're doing it in a very corrupt fashion, right? Your job is then tested against the word. It's not to say that, well, we're the U.S., so obviously we're in the right. That's wrong. Every earthly kingdom is corrupt. Until the Lord comes back and we are living in his kingdom, it won't be ran right. And that's the nature of things. We know that. The Bible tells you that almost verbatim. So hold things to that standard. Don't hold things to a patriotic standard that's been preached to you and told to you over and over and over again. That's completely separate from what the Lord has told us.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good point too, because I think that point that you just made about all that is why a lot of people have difficulties submitting to the sovereignty of God, because their entire lives, and myself included, have submitted to the sovereignty of my country. Yeah. And, I am for my country. I'm for the people in my country. And when people talk about how the government's bad and everything, it's a sobering thought, but you have to remember that the government's made of people who are doing their best.
That's true.
And for their own benefit, like the hierarchy of needs. A lot of people are just preventing that from being infringed upon. But when they make decisions that oppress other people, it's because they're broken in some way too, And so I think it's really important to fight for your country, but not for the country as an entity. Right. Fight for your country because it's a collection of people. It's a church of people that are following something, right? You can have a church that's following not Jesus. Yeah. So,
There's an atheist church out there.
Yeah, there's churches for all sorts of things, and it's like if they're following something that's truly unhealthy, your heart should weep for them, much like our heart should weep for the people that are oppressing us, much very similarly to the I'm losing my words. People
who are lost.
I'm looking at Brandon. I'm like, I know this phrase. Hurt people.
Hurting people hurt people.
That's what I was trying to say, guys. Something podcast host. I don't know. But Brandon, do you have any comments or questions? You've been sitting over there awfully quiet.
I've just been taking some time thinking about like what things are being said. I think the only things I'm gonna lean in as close as I can. I think the only things that have been on my mind is like, that's an idea. Yeah. Hopefully you can hear me better. That's been on my mind. It's just like I've been thinking like, why like sometimes I wonder and worry if like people see and this is me speaking on behalf of other white people. I feel like, now I can't speak for all white people, but I feel like a good majority of the white people that I know that are patriotic or whatever, I think like a lot of us, we're not patriotic because it's like America's perfect any much more than you would be or anything. It's more like we see, I don't know, I grew up in like with a lot of church history, and I see of like all that has happened in other countries and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I see a lot of things that this country has gotten right, and for those things that it's gotten right, I've seen like it seems like a lot of people just want to topple it all rather than topple the bad stuff.
That's real.
And so like that's been my like the main thing of like whenever I if ever I come across in a disagreement or something, it's more of like those who don't see history and understand it are doomed to repeat it. And like I don't know. I don't feel like I'm adding anything to this. I'm just like thinking.
No, and I get that, and I think from somebody who's like from an oppressed people group, I think we've got to learn hot take. Yeah, but people of color have to do things too. Oh man, people hate when you say stuff like that. Oh my god, at me. But
what's your social media?
At me at big.bear.jones. Please, I hope you don't like me saying this because it means you're really thinking about it. But I think people from oppressed people groups do have to have some grace for that, insofar as sometimes I think people jump to like absolutes. There is no absolute truth but the word of God. As if you're a believer, you gotta know that. This is 101. That's important. And so I think we take these absolute stance like I will never say all cops are bad. This is the most wild thing I've ever heard. But I do think on the flip side, it is worth understanding when you go, man, certain people are unfairly policed. I think sometimes there's like a backlash when you say things that are big sort of ideas that are like, well, certain things aren't bad, right? I was listening to a radio station, a family member, I'm not going to say who it is. A family member of mine is like very conservative actually. And she was listening to this radio station. The radio station was talking about how people who want to reform prisons, all they want is just like all the prisoners to be let go and X, Y, and Z. And I was like, that's not what they want. I don't think anybody wants all the prisoners to be let go. So there is a middle ground insofar as understanding, yeah, man, like we don't live in the worst country ever and it could be worse. But if you're from an oppressed people group, I think sometimes you do feel oppression that other people don't feel so right. Like a white person may be like, man, this country's got a lot right. And to a person who's from an oppressed people group, you go, yeah, but like it's also got a lot wrong. And there's just a difference in understanding. It's sometimes hard to see all that this country does get right because historically, I've been hate crimed. Like every generation of my family's been hate crimed in various degrees of heinous to not heinous. My mother had a black cat when she was a kid. They slit its throat, like one of her neighbors slit its throat, painted nigger and blood on their door, God. And then burned the cat body on their doorstep.
What the heck?
Yeah, and it's my grandmother's house. And so we like go there, and we were just talking about the story because I was talking to them about I got hate crimed when I had first moved away to school. Somebody had like plastered a bunch of KKK stuff all over my stuff and like had like this big thing of like.
And when was this?
Where the nearest location was. I moved away to school at like 15 and I'm 22. So
oh my gosh, 7 years ago.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. And so like, but I'm like, oh, that's not, we were having a conversation and they were like, that's not even that bad. And I was like, I hate the fact that you're saying that. And they were like, you remember the cat story? And I'm like, oh dude, I did remember the cat story. My little sister didn't know. So then they like reiterated it. Oh. And we were all like, man, yeah, when you say it out loud, that's really bad.
Like, they did that whole thing just 7 years ago with the cat?
No.
Oh,
that
was his grandmother.
That was my mother. And then my grandmother's had some, and every generation of folks I know has had some direct hate crime. Everyone. I've been hate crime several times, but like that one is the most annoying one, I guess. But like, so you go, oh, okay, it is hard to see sometimes where the country gets right. You have to have grace though for that. It's like, I hate saying this. It could be worse, and that is real. I think it's just understanding that this moral absolute of this whole country is great, is wrong, but also you're very correct, Brandon, in saying like this country's so bad, burn it all.
No.
That's also wrong.
Right.
Yeah, and we have to understand that. But I do think where I always go back to is in Daniel. It tells us every kingdom on earth gets less and less close to God until He returns. We have to understand that we're not living in heaven yet, and so me having a qualm with the way things happen in this country, it doesn't have to be wrong. I think people immediately sometimes go to, well, you don't even, it could be so much worse. Slavery was so long ago.
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, okay, yeah, no, that's real. But like,
Yeah.
people are still being oppressed.
Mhm.
And then on the flip side, it's that reverse of like, yeah, in other countries, man, people are like really dying though for saying things. Like just being like, I like pasta. And it's like, we didn't tell you could like pasta. So I sorry, I was trying to be vague and just nondescript about like a general country, but we do have to understand the world we live in. I don't think taking a moral absolute stance is good, and I would caution against that. People do that so often.
Those last
days.
scriptures you read, what was the second to last one?
What was it about?
Something about salt.
Oh, I believe it was.
Could you reread that? And
yes.
what was it?
It's Colossians 4:5. Be wise in the way you act towards outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversations always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone.
I think that is the answer, guys. And I think that's such a great scripture to follow because
dope verse.
on one hand, especially coming from the church, you're gonna meet oppression regardless of what you say. But if you look back at the Pharisees and how Jesus engaged with people, especially how he sat with like prostitutes and the tax collectors and all that stuff, and he was talking to them like normal human beings. What that is talking about, it's not saying tickle people's ears and tell them what they want to hear. It's speak to them in a way that's palatable so that you can understand that there's a relationship. Right. There's a relationship here and you're worth the words that I'm speaking. Yeah. I'm not speaking down to you. I'm speaking on your level, but I'm also having a standard where it's like, okay, well, here's my godly standard. Here's Jesus. Do you want to come? Because everything with Jesus is an invitation. And when you're engaging with people who are outsiders, you don't want to just say, hey, you're an outsider. Let's engage on the fact that you're an outsider. You're always going to be over there. It's like, no. What do we have in common?
That's real.
Right. Let's find something that's seasoned to talk about, and let's meet there first, and then let's engage with, okay, well, here's the truth. What do you think about that? Right. And then just see where they're at, because people are going to be at different parts in their story when you meet them. Not everybody's going to say yes just because you want them to say yes to whatever.
Yeah. And I'll actually give you a good example too. Again, the color line, like race, right, to me is the most prevalent barrier that like causes the divide with people, but it can be anything. And I'll give you an example. I was walking to the subway. I was like almost late to this train.
This was in California?
Yeah, this was in California. Okay. And I'm almost late to this train, and there's this huge homeless problem in California. So
what part of California were you in?
I was in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Biggest, I think.
Yeah, dude, it's terribly sad. Like, it's devastating. Nobody's doing anything about it because they view everybody as an outsider, right? So this is a prime conversation, right? So I'm walking down to catch this train, and I feel like I'm like late, and I'm like, man, I'm really gonna miss this train. I'm freaking out. And I walk past this gentleman, and I was wearing a shirt. My grandma got me just a shirt that says Jesus Thug. To go back to the don't call yourself a thug thing. Really real. And I would never do that. But the shirt is hilarious. I think it's the funniest shirt I own. And I was wearing it. I do movie stuff, and I was wearing it out to sets, and people were looking at me like, what? People were like, what? I was like, you know what it is? I'm a thug for Christ, baby. It's just ridiculous. And I'm walking past this guy, and he goes, hey, man, I appreciate the shirt, big homie. And I was like, oh. And so I turn around, and it's this guy, this homeless gentleman. And I walked up to him, and I was like, yeah, man, I thank you for the love. Like, I think it's funny. And he's like, yeah, that's really real. And then he started talking to me about the Lord. And I was like, and I could sense there was something there, and I was like, man, is there like something up with like you and the Lord? Like, what's going on? You know the Lord, right? He's like, yeah, but I've done X, Y, and Z, and he was explaining to me how he got to ending up homeless, and I was like, man, jeez, I was like, I'm so sorry for you, right? You weep with people who are weeping. And I was like, man, I'm sorry. I genuinely, like, that is tough. And we had this conversation, and he really felt like he couldn't repent. And I was like, dude, you can repent. You can always repent, man. Like, the Lord always wants you to turn back to him. Don't feel like you got to do anything. You can't add or subtract from the cross. Like, Jesus has already paid for your sins. It's just about accepting it. And when you mess up and you do things your own way, you just repent. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really that simple. And I explained that to him, and I prayed with him. I was like, hey man, can I pray with you? Pray with him a little bit. And he's like, hey, do you have any money? And I was like, man, I really actually don't keep cash, and I had spent all the money that I had to get to my job. And I was like, dude, I'm broke as a joke, bro. Like, I'm out tragic out here. I really can't help you. And he stopped me and he said, that's fine. He's like, he said, that's fine. I have to ask that question. But he stopped me. He grabbed my hand and he said, thank you. And I was like, yeah, man, no problem. Like, the Lord loves you, man. He's like, no. Thank you for talking to me like I'm a human being. He said, just thank you for talking to me like I'm a human being. And then he really did just give me a hug. And I was like, okay, man. Gave him a hug. I ended up making my train. It actually was this crazy, weird, like, montage section. I like ended up running through the train station. But this guy, man, like, he genuinely made a point to stop me. He's like, I have to ask you, you have any money? That's like my prereq of this conversation. But the way he said it was just, I don't mean to belittle that situation, actually. But the way he said it, he was like, I gotta ask you that question. Like, you right? I was like, man, I was like, you right. With how dry my wallet looks, I should be asking you that question. But we were having a good time. We were having a good time. Me and Johnny. I still pray for Johnny. Pray for Johnny, actually, folks. But he made a point to stop me. And what was of value to him in that interaction was the fact that I talked to him like a person. It shook me to my core. I really almost cried. I cried on the train going home. But I really almost could have cried right then and there. Because you don't think about that. Like, that's the outsider, right? And yeah, man, like a dingy black dude on the side of the street, like, let's not act crazy. That would even make me a little nervous. I'm not gonna lie to you. So for those of you out there, like, I don't know if I could do that. Yay! Hey, calm that down. Even I know, but I think most people we've attuned our eyes to see those folks as outsiders. We've attuned our eyes to see so many people as apart. That's not the vision the Lord has. And think about it like this. You're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. Wouldn't you like the Lord to see you as valuable, to see you as somebody worth talking to and having an encounter with, right? You want to have an encounter with the Lord. You want these miracles. You want to be a part of the church. You want blessings, right? So what you're really saying is you want the Lord to walk with you. If we're supposed to be Christ-like and we're supposed to love our neighbors ourselves, shouldn't you love somebody else enough to want to be that for them, to shine your light to them in that way, or to show them the Lord or the face of the Lord, or to minister to them, or to get ministered to by them, right? Johnny ministered to me as much as I ministered to him on wax. Changed my perspective. But that's because the Lord happened to touch my heart in that moment to see him not as an outsider, right? That's important.
Yeah,
that's important.
And that's such a good perspective too, because a lot of times, and Christians been calling you out because we have a responsibility to see people as they are.
Yeah.
When you look at all the people in the world, thinking about our government, our country, whatever, as a group of people, they're all people that are wonderfully made. In Psalms it says we're wonderfully made.
Yeah.
Even the homeless person on the side of the street that's whacked out on crack and is schizophrenic, they are wonderfully made, and Jesus is pursuing their hearts just as much. And I think it's so cool that when we just Colossians 4:5 says, speak with them with I can't quote it specifically because I don't have that one memorized, but it was something like with salty words or seasoned
Seasoned
words and
salt,
stuff.
yes,
It's like
seasoned salt, yeah.
when you see people as humans and you engage them on that level, especially if they're
Yeah.
Christian too, you can get far more than you think that you can give
Right.
from them.
Yeah.
And it's not about getting from them. It's like, wow, I needed that too when I came in with
Yeah.
the presumption that
Iron
I'm just going to
sharpens
give.
Iron. Iron sharpens iron. Just because the iron is on the side of the road doesn't change what it is.
Yeah.
Iron in a container made of platinum is still iron, and iron on the side of the road is still iron. Iron will sharpen iron. That's factual. Like we're not talking anything other than facts. Iron sharpens iron. There's no when iron touches. There's no yada yada yada. Iron sharpens iron. That's the full stop on the sentence. So. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And actually, as a matter of fact, I don't mean to continue to just run this stream into the ground. Just run it up.
Well, the good thing, Jordan,
People are going to sleep on us now.
we can't get fired.
Oh, sick! Oh! Oh! I previously worked on a podcast where I very well could. So I'm digging this. What? I'm like, I gotta get into a business like this. No, but on wax. Insofar as you say,
What does that mean on wax?
On wax, it's a phrase that I've got to find a better way of saying. But I mean it like a wax stamp, like it is sealed. Like that is what it is. Full. It means the equivalent of like saying full stop.
What?
When somebody's like full stop.
What does full stop mean?
Full stop is like a technical phrase for a period. I think it's used more in like
Gotcha.
England. You'll be like full stop, right? But
Fair.
a full stop is when you want to say, and that's the end of that. I will say on wax. That is, the letter is folded up and I put the wax on it. That's what it is. Right. Thank you. Yeah, that's the phrase for it. Period. Whatever. But in to back that everybody's fruitfully made. I think it would be helpful for us, and I would say the church, right? If you're a like believer, you're my brother. Your home should be open to me, and you should be able to eat from my table whenever you want to. We'll be doing that for millennia anyway. So, in real words, God doesn't ask us to make images of Him. Even in the Old Testament, He's never made into an image. If you think about the Ark of the Covenant, there are angels, right? And then there's an empty throne. There's no image there. The Lord has never asked for an image to be made of Him, and one of the commandments is, right, have no other idols, right? Like, the Lord doesn't do idols. Why? He's already created His own images of Himself. That is every person you look at. When the Bible tells you to love your neighbor as yourself, it's a second part of the command. It's love the Lord your God with all your strength, with all your mind, soul,
Heart, mind, body, and soul.
Heart, mind, body, and soul. Thank you. Right. So the heart, mind, body, and soul, you love the Lord your God with that. Right. The second commandment is love your neighbor as yourself, and it says all the commandments are fulfilled in these. Right. The other commandments were don't create any idols. That's one of the other commandments. That commandment is fulfilled in love your neighbor as yourself and love the Lord your God with all you have. Why? Because God has already created His own image. He created all of us in His image. We're called to love our neighbor, right? That's the closest thing you have to an image of God. So you're supposed to love God with everything you have, but love your neighbor with everything you have, because they're the image of the Lord. That's why He asks us for no other idols, none. That's why in the Bible, right? If the Bible is this story that traces us to Jesus, right? Moses was sort of that, but not enough. Moses on the mountaintop even talks with Jesus and is like, yeah, you're right, Jesus, you're crazy cool. And I'm like, kind of cool, but you're way more cool, right? David is a representation of a king figure that the Lord will become, right? Melchizedek, he shows up in Hebrews, right? It talks about Melchizedek. He's a representation of somebody who is like Christ, but not quite Christ, right? That's the entirety of the Bible, traces folks who are like that. The Lord gives us those lineage of folks because those are other images of Christ. They're not Christ, but they're Christ-like, which is the same thing we're called to be. It's why the Bible is full of people who do these things, right? Moses leads everybody in this Exodus, right, following the Lord. But he is the sign that one day a greater Messiah will come that will lead all of us into a promised land that is even greater, right? David is this kingly figure who rules over God's people and does it justly, having a relationship with the Lord. And even though he fails, right, he's still a representation of what Christ will inevitably be, a king who rules over all of us and his thing. The Bible is a book of images of Christ. It tells us that we are the image of Christ. it tells us to fulfill all the commandments by loving your neighbor as yourself, as well as loving the Lord with all your strength, because your neighbor is the closest thing you have to an image of God. That's also why he says have no other idols. So if you have no other reason than to love your neighbor, that person's created in God's image. That's not to say that somebody else should be your idol, but that is to say that that person, if you can't love your brother, right? And that means everybody. If you can't love your brother, your neighbor, right? Your sister, your mom, right? Your enemy as yourself, you can't actually love the Lord. That's where the separation is coming from, because the Lord gives you images to love. He gives you images to love, images to see how much they're not even like Christ, right? That's what the whole Bible is. Moses isn't even Christ. Real cool, not even Christ. David, real cool, not even Christ. Job, super righteous, blameless, but not even Christ, right? Christ comes and fulfills that. And so how can we love the guy who fulfills all those things? That great figure, that God as man, our one true example of how to live on this earth, our salvation, our hero, our comforter, our friend. How can we love that if we don't love the people who we see on a day-to-day basis? It's incongruous. And the Bible addresses that incongruity. It says that doesn't make any sense, right? You fulfill the law by doing two things. Love God with everything you got and love your neighbor as yourself. That is our call. So I guess, again, you looking at race as a specific boundary that separates people, if you can't love the neighbor you have of a different racial background as yourself, you're missing the call, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't love the other iron that's on the side of the road, if you can't love your homeless neighbor, right, and that outsider, you can't love them as the image of Christ, then how can you love Christ? We're all fruitfully made. It tells us that. Christ is even more fruitfully made. Christ is the fruit, right? We are fruitfully made. We're made to be like Christ, all of us. And so if you're missing the opportunity, it's an opportunity. You weren't born into the kingdom of the Lord. You were born into this life. That's a blessing. That's a blessing because you get to get acquainted with everybody. Hopefully, you'll be spending eternity with. That's like what the bonus is.
Yeah, friends, not acquaintances.
Yeah, friends, not acquaintances. So, man, you got to start to understand, right? You're looking at the image of Christ. Every person you disrespect, you're disrespecting the image of Christ. Every person you don't mourn with who's going through pain, you're looking at the face of God, and you're saying you're not worthy of my time or for me to feel empathy towards. That's how scary real it is, and that's how real the Bible tells you it is. So I'm not saying anything that isn't true. I will merch that. Like, I would stake my name on that, straight up. And so, again, in terms of people being fruitfully made, you're very right. Right? Iron sharpens iron. People are all of value, are all of the same value to the Lord. And you should love them. And you should love them not as much as you love Christ, but you should love them with the love that you want to be given to you, that you want Christ to give to you. You should love them that way.
Christ, that you can love them better and better.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, guys, you can tell that Jordyn's got a lot of good stuff. And Jordyn, if they want to follow you, how would they follow you?
I don't do anything, so you're going to be bored out of your mind. I guess I'm on Facebook as Jordyn Jones.
Gordy.
It's Jordyn. Jordyn Jones. On Facebook, I guess, hit me up. I'm on Instagram, big.bear.jones. And I think I'm on LinkedIn. You can find my website. I think it's like myportfolio.jonesjordan.com. There's really not much to see there anyway. You're going to be bored, I promise you.
Oh, gosh.
Or
you can just move to Winston-Salem.
Yeah, I guess, man. I'm around. I'll be helping you two out, I think. So I'll be in the mix. You'll hear.
Well, I mean, after tonight, who knows, man? We're only acquaintances, and you talk so much. What the heck?
Oh my!
I know you know the Lord, Jordyn, but
got him.
Anyways, Jordyn, thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for all your wisdom and for your perspective, and for this topic especially. I think I'm spitting all over my mic. I think this is a really good topic, just because navigating life as a Christian is really weird, and,
Yeah.
and navigating it when it comes to application is even harder.
Yeah.
But thanks.
Yeah. It was my great pleasure. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
Well, with that said, we want to thank you guys for watching. We broadcast every Monday, Friday, and Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tomorrow we're going to be playing some games. Brandon, we playing Overwatch. We're going to be playing Bye, guys.
I can see far away from where I've been. He says I see a potential. I see a potential in my eyes. I see a potential. I never lost sight of the reason why you're alive. You're alive. You're alive.